Hi, and welcome to our next episode of Pathways to Physical and Emotional Wellness. Today's topic is teens and stress. So we'll be talking to a few teens in our community about how they manage stress and find that mental wellness. We'll also be talking to Debbie Della Riva about some tips she has on how teens can work with and through stress a little bit better. Before we get started, huge thank you to our sponsors, Pfizer, CVS, and HFA. And right now, we'll just pause for a second for a quick word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. Alexa, thanks for doing this.
Of course.
Can you tell us who you are and a little bit about how you're connected to the community?
Sure. So, my name is Alexa Cuevas. I'm a 17-year-old senior. I have a younger brother who has mild hemophilia B, and then my mom also has it, and I may or may not have it, so it's a debatable kind of thing at the moment. And my mom is Nellie Miranda. She works for the chapter. And we've been a part of the community for a really long time. So I come, I volunteer, I also participate in events. It's like a combo kind of thing of everything.
You're amazing. And thank you for doing this. So I have some questions for you about stress. We're thinking about teens with stress. What do you see as the biggest stressors for teens nowadays?
I think school probably. Like, that's a big one for me at least.
And what about school?
Trying to get good grades, doing homework. Me as a senior, probably getting ready for college, everything you have to apply to, all the deadlines you have to meet.
Do you find yourself, when you're feeling these stresses, are you thinking about the what ifs related to it?
Yeah, I'm like, what if I don't finish it? What if I turn this in late? What happens if I don't do this right? Or usually it's like that, like, what if I didn't do it good enough?
Do you find that stress increases or decreases when you have a sense of belonging with something? Do you like fitting in? Does that matter related to stress?
I think definitely. If you think you're like doing really well in something or you're really good at it, I feel like you feel usually less stress. And if you know it's something you're not that great at or something that like you know you probably don't do as well, or maybe even you don't feel like you belong that much, definitely that you get more stressed.
Right. Well, I wonder how much comparison, I mean, I think about social media and all that, where we're comparing ourselves against others. How much does that affect stress?
I think that definitely adds to stress. Like looking at people like, oh, this person's done all this and I haven't done that yet. Oh, I feel like that just builds more and more unnecessary stress.
Yeah, I think for teens it's really hard. I was talking to the other folks about like what it was like for me, and I remember it being a stressful time. You know, like, and you're finding yourself and all of that, and do I fit in, and all those what ifs. For you, when you experience stress, where do you have a part in your body that you feel the stress?
I think like my stomach. I can feel it like in my gut that I'm stressed.
So like a butterfly kind of feeling, or
like
how
a
would you describe
butterfly kind of feeling. It's like a nervous butterflies.
You just squeeze. Do you have pain?
No, not really.
No pain with your stress.
No.
Some people like talk about like ulcers and things like that where they like feel it, but your stomach is where it's at.
Yeah, I think so.
That's interesting.
I feel like my gut telling me.
Like your gut. Oh,
Yeah.
That's a good point. Speaking of that, your gut telling you something. Has there ever been a time where stress was helpful to you?
Definitely.
How so?
Yeah. So right now is the moment I'm dealing with all the kids, and the stress and the adrenaline, like, they help you try to keep your head straight. Like, oh, this person's doing this, you have to make sure someone doesn't go there. The stress, like, helps keep you aware.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I feel stress can be helpful.
That's good. Does it feel helpful most of the time or just some of the time?
It depends on the circumstance, I think. Because, like, if I'm at home stressing over homework, it's definitely not that helpful.
Right.
But if I'm, like, doing something and I need to, like, think, oh, this person's doing this person's doing this, I have to make sure someone doesn't do that or someone's watching that, then stress is feeling more useful.
Okay, interesting. What about in your family? The fact that you guys live with a bleeding disorder in your family, how do you think that's impacted stress in your family?
I feel like there's definitely always been, like, a slight stress, like when my brother does something or if, like, something happens or if he... Usually half the time it's like, oh, he was playing in recess and then he tripped and fell, and then it's like, oh, do we have to go to the hospital? Do we have to not? Do we stay? Do we go? That, like, stress about, like, what do we do? Will something happen? No. So I feel like that's always kind of been there, and then when it does happen, of course, that's, like, a big part of our lives.
Right. But it's almost like, because it is a big part of your life, you guys might know how to handle stress slightly better.
Probably, definitely so.
Because you had to do it a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, there are always two sides to it. I'm wondering, for you, whenever you experience stress, what are things that you found to kind of cope through, or what's been helpful for you with stress?
So usually it depends on what kind of stress I'm feeling at the moment. If I'm feeling like a good, useful stress, like when I have to do a lot of things at once, and that like the stress helping me like focus, then what helps me usually is like try to get things done. So then the stress goes away. If I'm nervous about something, I want to finish it, so then it'll go away.
Oh, that's interesting.
That helps. But if it's like a looming kind of stress, like, oh, I have to turn that in on Tuesday, it's like I try to get it done as quickly as possible, so it's not that just like, you haven't done that yet.
What kind of things do you wish teens knew about stress, or if you wanted to leave them with a message around stress, what kind of message would you want to leave teens with about stress?
My message would be, don't let the stress drown you. Because if you lose yourself in the stress, then it no longer is helpful, because it can be helpful. But if you just, like, dig yourself a hole of stress and you just, like, oh, I have to do this and this and this and this and this, you're not really solving anything, and then the stress kind of got the better of you. So you have to, like, try to find solutions instead of just letting the stress kind of drown you. That's
interesting. You know, like, the analogy of drowning is interesting, because I'm wondering, like, when you're dealing with that stress, how do you not let it drown you? Like, what is that moment when you are able to change that?
Yeah, so it's like stress, the difference between good and bad stress for me is always, it's like the moment between when you're drowning and when you're not. It's like that brink. When you like think that like, oh, you've got too much, it's not going to be enough. And then when you realize if you can fix at least one thing, one small thing, if you can solve anything, I feel like that like gives you that little boost to be like, okay, no, I can use this stress for good. Like I can use it to convince myself or like encourage myself.
This is great advice. Thank you, Alexa, for doing this.
Of course.
Great seeing you.
It was good to see you too, Jeremy.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Could you introduce yourself, say your name and how you're connected to the community?
Oh, of course. My name is Josue Ferrer. I'm connected with the communities by being what many teens now call each other bleeders.
I do have a question for you. Teens, like
what's up?
Growing up in high school or whatever, I remember it being stressful. I think it's more stressful now. What is your thought about the way teens are experiencing stress nowadays?
I mean, me personally, I'm like more like stressful on the fact like oh hey, what if like college doesn't work out? What if military doesn't work out? It's a lot of things to consider.
Right.
So yeah, I would feel like it would be future.
No one has mentioned the what ifs yet, but to me, that's what stress is.
Exactly. It's the what ifs that really would stress you out.
And I don't know about for you, and so it's interesting because I hadn't really thought about like when you're a teen, there's so much of your life ahead of you.
Exactly.
It's almost like the what ifs are even bigger. There's
Absolutely.
a lot.
I think it's best to say that like each teen handles stress in a very different manner,
right?
Like in the future.
It's all unique.
Exactly.
Because everyone's experience is unique, and the things they're dealing with, their what ifs that are in their brain are unique.
Because sometimes like some teens don't even plan their what ifs. They don't even plan like what if this happens? What if this happens? No, they don't even plan it. They just go get on into it.
Yeah.
It's a thing that you have to like really balance, because like if you don't find like one balance, the other part is gonna fall. Like
right.
you focus too much on the future, you're gonna lose focus on what's going to happen right now.
Yeah.
For example, like what's happening with me right now, I'm focusing too much on the future. I'm planning too much on the future that like literally in school
and everything's kind of like
exactly everything like in school, everything's kind of falling apart. So like you have to find like that midpoint, the equilibrium, to balance both your planning for the future and what's happening right now.
I'm wondering if there's a time that you have felt stress that helped you.
A stress that helped me. Like, well, I believe like with stress, you have to find a balance.
Yeah.
Because too much stress, it hurts you, and way too little stress, you're careless.
What have you found to be helpful? Are there like 3 things that you have found when you're experiencing stress that have been helpful for you?
Personally, music. Music has been a very good like factor to it. Like calming music, like classical music. It's really very calming if you think about it. Talking with friends, because I know there are some introverts out there that don't like to be talking with friends, or like rather like not discuss their feelings about like one another, but it's best to talk about it and let like loose of your stress than let it keep building up and eventually, like, you ever heard of that term like that big bomb and like that fuse is gonna eventually just die down?
Right.
Think of like that fuse as like stress. That stress is gonna continue going until poof.
But it affects everyone around.
Also, like knowing like when to step out of a situation. Like if you find like a situation that's way too stressful, it's really okay just to step out of the situation. Like say you need a breather, I need a break, just give me like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Just step out of the room, and after you recompose yourself, you get back into it, say it's okay. It's something to do like for a temporary term, but like it does help if it starts to get like way too stressful.
I love it.
I really, that's my 3 main things I do if I'm starting to get way too stressed out.
Those are great advice.
Don't let stress be too big of a burden. Like for example, don't let stress like continue going and going and going. Like there are like help out there. There's help. But yeah, unfortunately, stress is a big factor that all of us have to deal with. But it's something that we can control.
It's interesting. That's good advice. Thank you so much for doing this today, man.
Thank you, Jeremy.
I appreciate it. See you later. All right. Welcome, Aaron. Thanks for coming, man.
Yeah, no problem at all, Jeremy.
So talk to me about, like, I was having a conversation earlier with someone about where I feel stress in my body. Like, where does it show up for you?
Usually in my hands.
In your hands? How?
Yeah. I always want to do something with my hands. I always move them around even when I talk.
Yeah.
I have a little chain around my finger that I spin just to keep calm.
Oh, really?
Because I always feel like I have to hold something, carry something. I always want to do something with my hands. So doing nothing worries me.
Is there a time in your life that you feel like stress has been helpful to you?
Usually we're under pressure in situations where there's a time limit, and if the stress builds up, it encourages me to push further or do it faster or find the solution even quicker.
Okay. Interesting. Do you think that you're having a bleeding disorder in your family affected stress within the family in any way?
I think the stress went away after a while because most of the times I don't even react to bleeds or so. It's a very troublous situation when I don't even know personally if it's a major thing or a minor thing, because after going through it for so many years, for me, I'm not sure if I should report it or just keep it to myself, because even the smallest things to me could be major, the biggest things to people could be just very minor for me.
So do you feel like at this point you're at a place that's a good place for you, or do you feel like that is still not, is that hard?
It's still difficult for me because if I don't see the minor things as major, and I still have to find a middle ground if like minor things or major things that other people might see as major and I see it as minor, or if I see it as minor and they see it, so on. So
what have you found, could you share 3 things that you found that help you with your stress?
Usually it's either music, finding something to do with my hands, or just maybe sometimes go out for a walk.
Cool.
Don't stress about the minor things. The minor things start building up and then they seem major. After seeing what the problem was, don't start adding problems. Start adding the solutions.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Good. Well, you've got a ring that spins. That's a solution.
Yep.
Your camera's a solution. You're doing it, man. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Thanks, man. Bye. Well, welcome back. We're here with Debbie Della Riva to talk about stress. Hi, Debbie.
Hey, hi, Jeremy.
What a thrill to have you here. I know about you, and I promised you, I told you, I said, don't look at the camera. But for this one question, let me ask you to tell the folks at home who you are and how you're connected to this community, a little bit of why mental health matters to you.
Absolutely. So my name is Debbie Della Riva. I wear a lot of hats in the community, a lot of different people within it. I'm a licensed professional counselor. But I guess what really is important here is that I got into this journey when my son was born with severe hemophilia A 29 years ago. And so my husband and my entire family have been really active in all different types of community programming. We've been in national boards. We've been in advisory boards. I've had the pleasure of going to many different conferences and been speaking. And what really happened for me is in 2018, my 2 worlds of being a therapist and being a community member meld together. And that's when we had a very significant individual in our community die by suicide. And it was one of those moments, Jeremy, where you just decide, my idea was, oh gosh, why me? And not why me. What can I offer to the community? What capacity do I have? And then it struck me the idea that why not me? And that's where my passion developed from.
Oh, I love that. Tell me, what kind of thoughts do you have around stress? Where do you see it in the community? Where does it show up for you personally? And I think one of the framings I want to have for this conversation is around teens too, and stress.
Oh, definitely. And so, that is the topic. I mean, I don't go to any conference without somebody grabbing me or summons me to go talk to them about the type of stressors that they're under right now and how it's affecting them, they're affecting their world, their internal world, and how to deal with this. And so, we already know about how we intrinsically have it more difficult than a lot of people, dealing with a chronic, expensive disorder that's involved pain and lots of unpredictability, So it's no wonder that it's here, and it's more profound, it's more concentrated here. And it's really interesting to me, though, when I speak to people, they tend to have like this idea that they're the only ones going through this. Or there's some kind of, they don't think that they're handling it just as well as other people. And that's usually the starting point, is just to normalize the discussion about it.
Especially because it can be so isolating, right? I mean, whether it be pain or stress or anxiety, those moments in our life, at least this is what I found. I can't speak universally, but what I've found is that those moments when we start to feel really isolated, like we don't have a way out, like we don't have anyone, no one could understand. We start beating ourselves up about the stress. I don't know, like it is a vicious cycle.
It is, and especially with our teens, there's already this idea that you need to be normal and to fit in, and they have self-prescribed ideas of what normal is, and usually it involves being strong and confident, and social media is just wreaking havoc over these ideal selves.
It does seem like, I mean, it does seem like stresses are, there's more things that are adding to our stress nowadays. I know the numbers out there are really, like, I mean, we're seeing more depression, anxiety across the boards. And I know you and I have talked a lot about the way chronic illness actually, kind of increases that risk more when it comes to that.
One of the known risk factors of developing all kinds of mental health conditions.
And, like you add into that any level of trauma that people have had, and it gets really tough. What are the things that you've learned about stress and ways that, folks can, I don't know if the word is reframe or work with or work through? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting, especially with teens. I noticed that they're a little bit more advanced, maybe than you and I in our age group. They know words like triggers and trauma, and they actually are beginning to put some language to this. And that's somewhat helping them because they can talk about it now, as opposed to just thinking that, I'm not enough or I'm not coping well. So
when someone in the community is dealing with stress, where are starting places for them?
Yeah, well, actually, you're part of the solution, Jeremy, because I mean that this is where I see people talk. They say the same thing. Out there, I feel alone, but here I feel like I'm normal and I'm accepted just the way that I am. And so because I know how difficult it is to be in your position and organize these different events, but those events are what matters. Sometimes they can be the difference between feeling like you're completely isolated and defective and feeling that you're loved and that there's hope, like the session that we had yesterday with the teens.
Yeah.
They were able to see two individuals who had all of this adversity behind them, and they were able to see that instead of just saying, if I can make it, you can make it, those individuals were saying that this is how I made it. I just took incremental steps, and they kept building on one another. And that, it's more of a pathway.
Yes. Yeah. Do you remember a moment in your life where you were able to break free of that isolation of stress? Or felt seen within your stress or understood within your stress?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't see it as a moment in time. I see it as a mindset shift. And I can't tell you exactly what it was. It took a while to build to it. But the moment that I accepted what I feel is what I feel, and what I think is what I think, that's what helped me. Because, when I went through trauma, you really do tend to think that you are either the only one or you'll try to share it with people and you'll be minimized or you'll be gaslit or it's not that bad. And you begin to question your thoughts. But then when I decided that, nope, as a result of what I went through, this is actually my truth, there's something about acceptance that there's just so much freedom that you don't have to be a chameleon and change colors because you're with a different person. So the answer to that question is really, it starts with acceptance and then compassion around that.
I mean, when I hear you say it, I also hear this sense of surrounding yourself by people that are caring and compassionate or whatever. That support system seems to be really important.
Definitely a support system is really important, and then developing an inner source of protectiveness. Because many times we go around with these defenses, and Patrick Lynch talked about that about a week ago at an NHF conference. He talked about, why are we going around saying we're okay when we're not? Because it's those things that we do that are defenses against, I don't want you to see that I'm suffering or I'm feeling stressed or not enough.
And back to that cycle thing about that. I mean, I think about this a lot. If every time someone comes up to me and they say, "How are you?" and I'm like, "I'm great," then they're going to sit there and think, "Why am I not great?" You know, like,
Yeah.
that's I mean, like, that if we don't show up authentically, you know, then we'll never get the help we need, right? Like, you have to ask for it. You have to tell someone, like, "Hey, Debbie, I'm struggling here. Like, I've had a hard week and it's hard," you know? And that honesty actually ends up helping others, it seems like.
It does, because it debunks the myth that everybody is okay.
Right.
And that you need to be okay all the time.
Talk to me about that, because I think that is an interesting misconception that I think not enough people think about. What do you mean by that you don't have to be okay all the time?
Yeah, it's when you get to that point where it's okay to talk about how you're really feeling, and of course it depends upon the interaction and the amount of personal safety you have with the person you're talking to, but when you're able to say that, you just allow the other person that space to also talk about their insecurities and how they're feeling.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about when it's okay not to be okay?
Absolutely. And that's just being, like you just said the word, authentic. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You can always be authentic, and usually it does involve communicating that you don't feel right at the moment. It generates itself just when you can just say, "I'm not okay, I'm having a hard day." It's always okay just to say exactly how you feel. Because what happens was, and a lot of times when people go to therapy, what they realize is that their feelings and thoughts are genuine, and you don't have to sugarcoat it, you don't have to explain it to other people, you just state your authentic truth. And that's what I mean by it's okay not to be okay.
And I'm wondering, as an active listener in those situations where you're trying to create space for someone and be a safe space, how can someone avoid that tendency to want to solve someone's problem and hold that?
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, stepping back and realizing that the impact of you trying to save someone or make it easier or solve a problem, really what you're communicating to the other person is that you can't do this. You don't have the abilities to do this. And so many times that really helps, especially like in a couples therapy, helps one of the spouses realizing that the predicament that they're putting the other person in.
So inherently, by trying to solve the problem for them, you're taking away agency and, like, you know.
You said it better than I did. Exactly.
No, I don't know. It's interesting because I think it's an easy trap to fall in, and maybe it's an easier trap for guys. Like, I'm gonna be honest, it's maybe an easier trap. It could be an easier trap for anybody, but that sense of you're trying to help, but not realizing that there can be damage done. Oh,
absolutely. And the other thing is too that you're bringing to the conversation all your experiences, and you might love this person, and you have a low window of tolerance of watching them suffering. So many times it becomes more about the person. Yeah. I can't handle this uncomfortable space, so I'm going to tell you that you need to change your mind, not see it the way you did.
That's interesting. You know, like, if anyone's listening at home, I wonder if we could share a little bit about where stress shows up for us. I know for me, in the body, where I feel stress, and I have had major, you and I have talked about this. I've had major panic attacks, major stress. I sometimes have gotten really hot and sweaty. My hands get sweaty. I feel like I'm going to pass out. I've actually passed out on a plane before because of panic and anxiety. So I know everyone's experience with this is different and unique. So I can't speak to others, but for me, I feel it in my shoulders. I get really tight in my chest and my throat, and it can be very overwhelming.
It can be, and then people see it as all or none. I can't handle stress, or I'm too vulnerable, or I'm too thin-skinned, or what have you. So one of the things that really helps people, and it doesn't mean you have to go into therapy, it's really just becoming educated about the mind-body connection. Knowing, number one, that you and I as humans, we're hardwired to have certain responses to stress. It's not a Jeremy problem or a Debbie problem. It's just who we are. And a lot of people, this is what I was telling them, the millenniums, and the younger people, they get this. They understand it's fight, flee, freeze. And there's another one, it's called appease. And that's usually when you're in a situation where you don't think you can get out of it due to your age or self-limiting thoughts, and you try to appease the person that's harming you. And many times that's how the cycle of abuse happens, because you actually identify with them and not
that gets really tough.
Yeah. And so that just knowing that these are normal responses.
Well, I'm wondering, speaking of the normal, talk to me about how stress can be a positive. Like, what is the silver lining of stress? Because I sit here and I'm like, I don't want to be stressed. I don't like it. It's horrible.
Oh, I know. There's so much freedom in becoming friends with stress.
Right.
Yeah.
What does that mean, though? What does it mean?
I totally. That's usually the response I get. People leave.
Yeah.
No. What it is that reaction that you're having in your neck, or in your heart, or your sweaty palms, that's an indication that things are, that you don't feel safe. And I don't mean just physically safe. You don't feel emotionally safe.
Right.
And so if you look at that as a signal, that's so different than, oh my God, I'm nuts. I got to get rid of this. I've got to be able to handle this better.
Right.
I do this whole exercise with a lot of clients where, just like you're very astute about where it is, where we just kind of relax for a little bit, and then we go to that part in our body and we visualize what it is. Like for you, it might be your heart racing. You might feel like your heart's like a rabbit, or and then what you do is that you even get more refined than that. Oh, what does that actually look like? Or could it be a ball of rubber bands together in your stomach, or what have you? And then you get to ask that part of yourself, I see you. This fits. This belongs. And then you get to ask it questions. You get to investigate it like the curiosity of a kid. How would you like for me to be with you right now? How can I serve you? What is it that you're frightened about? And it's really cool. You get to go inside and be with it for a little bit.
That's awesome. I mean, it's interesting because I've definitely gone to a couple of different. Whenever you struggle with something, you try to find solutions for it. Mm-hmm. So whether it be therapy or meditation or, like focusing was one of the things that I learned about. But you end up picking up these little tidbits that might sound silly. Like, I'm going to treat it like a rabbit. It sounds silly.
Sounds nuts.
But it's weird how that stuff can really make a difference.
Yeah.
I know they talk a lot about this idea of noticing, and we were talking about like where it shows up in your body. Part of the reason I have focused on that and why that's been helpful for me is because I can catch it earlier now.
Oh, you have more body awareness now.
Right. So like even now I'm like, oh, right here. I'm like, oh. And then as soon as I catch it, like by noticing it, I catch it, and then I'm going to be like, I know if I take a bigger breath in and a longer breath out, I'll feel better. Like it's little things like that. So I'm like, and I'll push it all out. I'm like, oh wow, that made a difference.
It did.
But it's almost like a little like micro experiment that you have to get to with yourself. Have you found anything like that for you?
Oh goodness. Yeah, something that's been really powerful to me is, so I'm having the stress response, and I'm asking myself, what am I believing right now? And that really helps. Like, am I frightened that you're going to make judgment of me right now during this podcast? And is it okay if I make a mistake?
Right.
What am I believing right now? It's really, really helpful. And then I ask myself, is this serving me? Is it serving me to feel like I have to be perfect?
Right.
And a lot of different things that you can do, but really it's getting to the heart of it. What's automatic right now. There's a concept called the trance.
Yeah.
And the idea is this, is that most of us live, if you have a circle and then you draw a line about 3/4 up, below is the unconscious things, the drives, the insecurities, the trauma, and above is your conscious awareness. And so like you and I are having a conversation right now, and then what could be below this is that I have to be perfect because Jeremy's put me in this position to be an authority on this. Yeah. And so that's the trance is, don't mess up. My palms are sweaty too. And the more that you can get into the depth of what am I believing right now? What is an automatic response to this? Where did I get that automatic response?
Right.
That you can't mess up?
Yeah. When you talk about automatic response, it immediately makes me think of those patterns, like noticing those patterns in your life. Let's drill down a little bit more into teens. You're very fortunate to get to talk to a lot of people in our community. You know a lot, it seems like you have an amazing ability to have people open up to you. And I'm wondering if you're seeing any trends with teens on what are stressing them out at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it would be the suspects the common suspects you would think, and that is as teens are assessing who they are in relationship to this group. That's usually the big one. There just tends to be this automatic assumption that they're not making it, they're not where other people are, and part of that is just forming identity in the first place. It's a very unpredictable, kind of muddy area.
Right.
What I'm noticing too, when you think about a bleeding disorder, that most of the kids say some similar things, that they feel safe here, but they don't feel safe out there. As if somebody can see into their bodies and realize something's not right and something's different. And so those are really the two things I see: wanting to fit in and not thinking that you're enough, or not thinking that you have the right stuff.
It's interesting because anxiety, in a lot of ways, I don't usually tie it to safety, but when you're talking about it, of course it's tied to safety, Right. When we talk about the stress response, a lot of people think about it as, a war veteran, meaning that the non-safety or a car accident or not safe, physical safety. But the most intrinsic need that you and I have is the need to be connected, loved, and accepted. I mean, that threat is just as damaging or perceived as being damaging inside of our body. What I mean to say, that threat about not being liked is just as big as a car approaching us. It's the same physiological response. The chemicals in your body, all that's the same. So
yeah.
Wow.
And so can you imagine a teen?
Yeah.
Just wanting to fit in and be normal, and then a teen that might live in a situation where their basic needs maybe they don't feel safe in their own home, or maybe there's such big socioeconomic challenges too, or we found in our community too that teens might have surpassed their parents in intellect and emotional awareness, and so there's that disconnect too.
It adds so many layers, it seems like.
Yeah. And the solution is just to say, I'm not okay, I'm not comfortable.
If you're trying to figure out ways to kind of give a few bits of advice for teens that either are feeling overwhelmed by stress, feeling isolated because of stress, or feeling prevented from reaching their potential because of stress, what are those initial steps to kind of help them out? I know we've talked a little bit about them, but if I kind of summed it up for folks, what would be those ways out?
Because a lot of people a lot of people get into all or none. I'm either confident or I'm not. And the suggestion for me is to help teens realize that they're not finished yet. Right now they're feeling this way, but it doesn't mean they're going to feel like that in 10 years. Secondly is finding a trusted peer or a trusted adult, so you can someone that's going to be there for you and listen without judgment. It's not always a therapist. For me, it was a 8th grade teacher that saw that I was suffering and feeling feeling the effects of otherness. And she herself was feeling that way because she was gay in Texas, teaching, and had to keep that under wraps. And so it was really nice. It was like two individuals that were feeling like otherness in the same place.
That's interesting. I think a lot about I can't remember the words like affinity and when you're pushing up against something, like you're either like pulling towards something or you're pushing against something. And I think like avoidance, like either affinity or avoidance.
Oh, gotcha.
And I feel like both of those things can lead to stress. So like maybe this person doesn't feel like they fit in, so they're avoiding certain contact because they don't want people to know or whatever. And like those moments where we're leaning one way or the other,
right,
towards like, I really want to be successful. I want, like that can cause stress, like pushing for something too much.
Oh, we see that in our community all the time.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's the straight A students. It's the people that are pushing the limits. And many times, and again, these are usually conversations by a bathroom at a conference, but those are the people that are suffering the most. And what they're saying to me is that, okay, I've reached this, now what? And that there's always this one more thing they need to do to prove to this community that they are what we've made them to be.
Are there any online resources that you feel like, either websites or places that you feel like are good for folks to think about for their mental wellness that could be helpful?
Oh, yeah, especially for teens. There's this foundation. It's called the JED Foundation, J-E-D,
Okay.
JED Foundation. And it really is. It addresses these concerns for adolescents to read about it and realize that they're not the only ones suffering for this.
Okay.
So that's one of the things. And I'm glad I have the platform to say this too. If there's a teen out there that's struggling, you can call, and it might sound counterintuitive, but the suicide prevention hotline, even if you're not feeling suicidal. If you're
right.
just
I
feeling...
thought anyone can call them.
No,
right?
exactly. So a lot of people don't know that. There are trained individuals there that just help you talk through your feelings.
That's a good point, because you're right. I think people think, it's not for me because I'm not feeling suicidal, but I'm really overwhelmed.
That's
they
right.
can still call that number.
Exactly. Or they're concerned about a friend, they can call the number.
Oh, that's great.
And then, but some people don't feel comfortable, and there's the crisis text line too. But the thing I'd like to put out to teens is something that's really accessible to them. It's they can go to this website called New Harbinger Publications, and it has things like depression for teens, resilience for teens. It's cool. It's a workbook that you can just...
It's all kinds of PDFs you can just download and...
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can look up any topic. There's a lot of topics on there, it seems like.
It can be anywhere from body image to I don't fit in to...
And what was the name of the website again?
New Harbinger Publications.
Okay. We'll add that link below.
Yeah, it's like a DIY, because like I said, not everyone needs a therapist, but what they do need is to see that they're not the only one. This is common.
Yeah. And you have a website too, Debbie,
Yes,
right?
I do. Thank you for the plug.
What is your website?
It's mentalhealthmatters2.com.
Oh, that's
and
great.
So Mental Health Matters 2 is a TOO.com.
All right.
And there's a couple of more resources for adolescents to check into.
That you want to share now or on there?
It's really the JED Foundation and crisis text line and things like Gut Monkey.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I really do feel like our community is trying to do a good job with this. And there's some folks in our community that are working really hard.
Right.
It doesn't mean that people aren't slipping through the cracks, because I think a lot of people still are. And I think the only thing that we have to do is keep this as a priority bit of conversation, because you never know when you might need a little help.
Right.
And even though I think I've known about JED Foundation, I totally forgot about it. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad you reminded me about that.
No, it's a great resource. And really what I want to let everybody know is that it just takes one person for you to reach out, and that person can be completely a game changer.
Yeah.
It can be that person that believes in you, that sees you, and it blooms from there. That was my experience. I'm sure you could probably tell me a mentor in your life or a teacher or
100%. And I just think about when things get tough now, it's those moments where I can look into someone's eyes and I know they see me.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes it doesn't mean I say anything. I just am seen. And I think you've always been that to me, so I appreciate that.
And vice versa, that's for sure. And another thing, too, is that this is such a fast-paced world. I mean, we know what's going on everywhere in seconds, and that's overwhelming. And so many times it's the speed at which we're moving, especially with teens.
Yeah.
And so it is one of the best techniques that I teach my clients is stoplight technique. And that is to be aware of your body and your mind, when you're just feeling completely overwhelmed or less than or what have you. And that's your signal. We talked about the stress as a signal. And then get into the yellow zone. And that is really, these teens are understanding the word triggers.
Yeah.
Okay, what is my trigger right now?
Right.
What am I believing? What are my capabilities to deal with it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the green zone is what is in my best interest right now? What is serving me and not serving me?
Right.
Yeah. And
everyone has a choice. It's like there's a noticing, and then there's an action.
Right. So, but it's funny with mental illness. Sometimes we think that we don't have a choice.
Right.
Like you're going to get nervous and you're going to feel this way and your throat's going to get tight, and that's about as far as we get.
Right. Well, and I'm a geek when it comes to diversity, and I think that all of our experiences are so diverse. The way you experience life is going to be totally different than mine, and I think mental health is very much like that. Just like our brains all are going to work slightly different, and maybe I have a higher amount of hormone that is hitting off than others, but it's still a human experience regardless, and it's my experience, and it's something that as I share it and I understand it better, it is helpful to everyone, myself and others.
That's right. It's self-understanding and putting a label to it, and then there's that other dimension that I think you do a good job at it too, and that is to throw compassion on yourself. Just like, yeah.
Right, compassion is it is hard, and I think a lot about the word grace too, just like that sense of it's okay,
Right.
Yeah, this has been really nice.
Oh, good. I hope it's what you hope for.
It's exactly what I hope for, and I think that what we'll do is we'll include those links that you talked about, so that people can find that stuff. And I just want to thank you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you for everything you do for all of us.
You're awesome. Thank you,
You too,
Debbie.
man. Bye.